We're back with I Forgot to Change the Stream Title, Episode 25, School Raze Part 1. You know which episode this is. School Raze. Part 1. This is an interesting episode to cover, so let's just go through this in order. You can tell this is a very doomy, terrifying Death Doom episode because it starts off with this extremely light, fluffy music and extremely light, fluffy tone. Almost saccharine, one might say. We see a rainbow mane filly. All love the mane. We see Cozy Glow pumping hands, and we see her being a super helpful to everyone, as well as a super helpful assistant. Huh. Not to compare Cozy Glow to Stalin, but one of the interesting things that has happened many times historically is it's astonishing how much power you can have when you're the secretary of the person on the throne. Now, obviously, you know, we've actually talked about this before. Spike has had an episode about this before. Not to great effect, but it is actually a thing. And I myself have spoken many times about the incredible value of a really, really good secretary. This has come up constantly in fiction we've covered. We've covered this in Control. We've covered this in Final Fantasy 15. It doesn't matter the genre, because this is a real concept. It doesn't matter how much in charge you are. The other person who is actually doing a lot of the implementation of your orders is the one who in many ways actually serves as the fulcrum of that power. And they help keep you on track because you have to keep track of 50,000 things, so they help you keep track of at least part of that. They help you stay organized. They are invaluable, and it's one of the reasons you need to really take care of your secretaries, because they can do a lot to mess with a lot if they feel like it. Yeah, exactly, Roscoe. It doesn't even take big. It doesn't even take big things. Just omit a number or a digit or forget to mention something to someone later. One of the things that actually came across my desk relatively recently is there was someone who was... I'm not going to name specifics here, but it was a military affair, and the person in charge sent the general to go deal with the situation. General goes to deal with the situation and takes his time implementing the order, by which point the situation has escalated past the point of dealing with it, so it's war, which is what the general wanted. And yeah, exactly, Lord Harriman. Yeah. So, anyways. Yeah, that's... Well, I mean, it kind of depends on the type of organization, too, Loner. A company is going to have a different power structure than a county, than a city, than a nation, than a military. You get it. And not every country is equal in terms of the size and scope of its bureaucracy. But you get the general idea. The person on top may be in charge, and that may even be true, but even in a dictatorship, the people who implement the orders are, in many cases, the actual fulcrums of power. Whether they do anything with that is debatable. But anyways, moving on. I'm sorry to get off on topic on that. It's something I was thinking of because Cozy Glow obviously knows that. And yeah, as we've talked about many times, there's no way that Twilight can keep up with everything and also being a head mare. So having an assistant is invaluable. I've always sort of assumed that Spike sort of filled that role for her because he has traditionally, and he's actually a really good secretary. But Cozy Glow clearly has been nuzzling in there. And yeah, I do say nuzzling on purpose. I'm going to comment on this later, too. But what I find absolutely fascinating about Cozy Glow is the voice actress does a brilliant job of it. It's very Dragon Quest. Let me explain that on the off chance you don't know what that means. So I have a concept called Dragon Quest Effect. That's where you're dealing with something that looks and sounds lighthearted and happy and fun, right? Colorful cartoons, light aesthetic. The enemies are like, and they all look silly, you know. And there's this light, airy, you know, orchestral music. Da, 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 da. Dragon Quest games are incredibly dark. Some of the darkest fiction I've actually covered and played. And they cover, I don't just mean dark as in, you know, Death, Doom, whatever. I mean dark as in they cover very serious, very realistic, very mature topics. But you wouldn't know it from looking at it. You have to engage your mind a little bit and actually think about what's happening. Cozy Glow sounds light and airy, and the light music plays. You know how they always do the music for whoever's speaking? They've been doing that since season 1. It's light music, and it's all ha da da ha ha ha. And that's the exact same thing, because if you divorce yourself from that, if you remove the tone, remove the voice acting, remove the music, and what you do is you look at the words on the paper. This is something I've talked about before, because while presentation matters, the core message matters too, and you can do a lot in analyzing if you break down and crucible down to just the message, the text on the screen, right? So if you just listen to what she's saying, it's much worse. And it's just, oh my God, some of the things she does are horrible. And so she does this fairly consistently, and I'll cover a specific example later. I called this in her first episode, by the way. I just didn't realize she was doing it to large-scale effect. I called her a sociopath, the fictional definition of sociopath, which, as a fresh reminder, yes, from Dragon Quest III onwards. Dragon Quest III codified the Dragon Quest effect, and it's been in every one since then, all the way up to 11, which is the most recent one. Sociopath. I called her a sociopath. The fictional sociopath is someone who lacks empathy. That's just the simplest definition. They care about themselves, and that's it. Other people, other things, other concepts only matter as much as they matter to them. So they'll take care of someone right up until the exact moment that someone is a problem or against them or whatever, and then they will drop them without a second's chance. And they won't feel bad about it. It'll just be, oh, okay, goodbye. It's a form of emotional detachment, and it's messed up much more so than psychopathy. In fictional terms, psychopathy is someone who actually derives enjoyment from causing harm and pain to others. See Handsome Jack over in Borderlands for an example of this. So, yeah, Cozy Glow, and honestly anybody at that level of sociopathy, is probably going to be a pretty good person at manipulating friendship as a tool in a setting where friendship has literal, tangible effects, right? As we've talked about many, many times about the very concept of the pattern. Now, one of the thoughts I have is whether or not this is the first time someone has been like this within the pattern. You could say statistics and you could say debatables, but there always has to be one first person. It wouldn't surprise me if Cozy Glow is the first person who is like this, who has this level of being a sociopath, and at the same time is also seeking to use friendship to her own ends, right? I mean, she literally says friendship is not magic, friendship is power in this episode, and there's a degree of truth to that. Okay, this is going to sound horrible. Don't worry, I'm not a sociopath. But one of the things I'm very good at is getting along with everybody. Now, the reason I do that is because I actually care and want to get along with everybody, and I have a great deal of empathy. But there is a skill and a talent in how you present yourself and how you portray yourself. There's an evenness. I'm really good at diffusing situations, about pulling people away from arguments, you know, about getting someone to listen to me, about making sure that I'm listening to them, right? And seeing Cozy Glow apply some of these tricks as she's doing it is kind of scary in its own right. Because what she's doing and what she's accomplishing is the same general thing for a completely different effect. And honestly, from a completely different source, if I might be so bold. Because again, the difference is a large amount of empathy versus a total lack of empathy. It's just weird how similar the two look in this circumstance, which is terrifying to think of, but moving on. Star Swirl, I think, so sociopathy, like most things, is a gradient, even in fiction. So I would say Star Swirl is a little bit sociopathic, but like only a little bit, right? Like just kind of leaning this way. By contrast, Cozy Glow is full tilt all the way over here. Like, we could argue that there's a few characters we've interacted with who would be considered sociopathic. Trixie is actually a good example of that. Certainly Trixie has some narcissism going on for her, which leans in that direction too. But obviously she's not full tilt because she does still have empathy. She does still care. She does still want. She does still connect with others legitimately. And yeah, Discord would be there, Chrysalis would be there, etc., etc. But I want to stress this because this is important, and I'm pretty sure this is done on purpose. Cozy Glow is by far the most sociopathic character we've seen on this show, by a large margin. She is the full tilt. There's even a scene later on, it's the last scene of the episode where we reveal that she has Starlight captured, lore shock, and she gets really pissed off because someone's gotten in her way. This is also a classic sign of sociopathy, especially in fiction. Remember, it's a lack of empathy, so the only thing that matters is yourself. So anything that gets in the way of what you want, anything that gets in the way of your ideas or your personalities or whatever, pisses you off more than it would. It's a disproportionate anger. People like that tend to be... Ugh! And you notice how she actually has to take a moment to center herself. Just at what is effectively a relatively minor bump in the road, because it's something that's not going according to plan for her, the one that matters. Like I said, full tilt. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself because the episode doesn't really reveal that Cozy Glow is behind all this. In fact, actually, what the episode does is brilliantly written. Credit to Nicole. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she's the one who wrote this episode. She also wrote School Days, part 1 and 2. And a smattering of other episodes. In fact, I think she's another of our rainbow... hang on, so there's a blue... no, that's Michael Vogel. Nicole, there she is. Never mind, she's done some good stuff. A blue, but then 2 oranges, 2 reds, and a purple. She did Shadow Play, she did School Days. But yeah, Cozy Glow is not portrayed as the actual villain of this work. The episode does a great deal of effort to try and make it seem that Naysay is actually the villain of the episode. Now, it's kind of leaning that way in general, but the first thing it does is it gives you the outright statement that Cozy Glow is villainous, that she is evil, but it does so in such a saccharine, sweet way that it's fine, right? Only people who are bothering to think about it are noticing it. Now, that's probably most people watching this show, especially by season 8, but the point is, the episode makes it enough of a questionable thing that most people are probably like, okay, what's she up to, more than, oh my gosh, she's the villain. Then Naysay enters the picture, and the episode hinges entirely to shift in a different direction. This is about when Tyrek also enters the screen, if you're paying attention. And there's a lot of straight cut. I shouldn't say a lot, I'm sorry, there's 2. But still, almost every straight cut back and forth between Tyrek and the events at the school go between him and Naysay. And one of the first things we see is Naysay throwing away Twilight's things, and Cozy getting upset at him, probably legitimately. And everyone's saying, oh my god, Naysay. And then the next thing that happens is Naysay is a bigot, which is pretty much his character arc. And then he decides to lock up several of the main characters, aka the Student 6, because, oh my gosh, you're behind a plot to steal our magic, which is nonsense and stupid. So, you see, yeah, as nature intended. God, I wanted to slug him, and that's the point. The episode hits you with Cozy Glow quietly, and hits you with Naysay loudly. And, by the way, Naysay is also one of those kinds of people who uses a legitimate world-ending level of crisis. Please think about what this world would work like without magic for a second. Think about what's going to happen to Cloudsdale. Just to name one example. Just one. He is using what is effectively an apocalyptic scenario as a method to try and pursue his own agenda. Yeah. Like I said, they go loud. Yeah, the Crystal Empire is going to freeze to death. There's a pretty good chance that most of their technology will stop working. I've theorized many times, and we've talked about on this show many times, that some of their technology... I haven't seen that, I'm sorry, Trihexia. Some of their technology is just straight up magic. Yeah, Canterlot. I'm not sure that's architecturally sound. This episode has one tiny line which the world builder in me just absolutely loves. The muffin. There's no magic, so we can't keep food cold. That one line exploded in my mind. The level of world building that implies. Food preservation relying on magic, which makes perfect sense. These ponies have had a mastery of their environment since season 1. And so seeing that them at the mercy of insects, rain, and food going bad is a wonderful way to really hammer in what this means on an environmental level. It's actually getting across the idea of how much of an apocalypse this actually is going to be. This is going to destroy their way of life, utterly and from the ground up. And they hint at this point, I think it'll show up in episode 2, we'll see, but they hint at the fact that at first it's, straight up magic, spells, telekinesis. Then they start to mention, other things are going to lose magic too. This is where things really get bad. Are Pegasi going to be able to fly? We know, thanks to the previous Tyrek episode, we know that the magical flight of Pegasi is magical. It is actually a magical effect. We know that the strength of Earth ponies is a magical effect. So, even the Earth pony, and credit to Applejack, but even the Earth pony is going to be brought down and probably be incapable of doing their job, like something as simple as tilling the farm, because they're going to lose their abilities. Never mind what's going to go on with the yaks, or the dragons, or the changelings. Think about it. Funny little anecdote, by the way, funny little side tidbit. Did you notice that Neisei was deliberately using an artifact to emulate magic because he couldn't use magic? It's a really, really tiny tidbit. They don't even call attention to it. He just uses his medallion every time he casts something. It's a nice little tidbit, and not only does it make sense because, of course, he would have to, but it's the quietest way that they implicate Neisei in all this. That he just happened to have his artifact, which he happens to know is going to work, and then he happens to use it to get his way. Huh. Now, the thing is, that is a red herring, as we've already discussed. And, yeah, he was like this at the beginning, too. It's very likely he's actually a very weak unicorn based on everything we've seen, so I'm sure. It's a nice little tidbit, though. This is an extremely well-constructed episode, by the way, despite its plot holes. So, God, let's actually rewind to the beginning of the episode here. I've just been going off on this topic. Please forgive me. I love how Starlight has the Pegasi spell up, which we've seen before. And then Yona falls first, which makes sense. She is a yak. She's the heaviest. And magic just fails. Okay, that's terrible. In my notes, this is mostly when I discuss the implications of this, which I've already kind of discussed, so I'm just going to move on from that. They mentioned Tyrek. Huh. It makes sense that Star Swirl is completely on top of this. By the way, I should probably mention that Star Swirl probably noticed this first, because he's Star Swirl. He is probably one of the most learned mages in the entire world, the wizard, if you will, in the entire planet. So, of course, he would notice that immediately. It is also worth mentioning, though, that you might think, well, why don't we get news about it first? Remember what we see. A flying pony who is desperately trying to get the letter to them because he can't magic the letter to them in time. So he probably found out about this a bit ago. It wouldn't surprise me if there are other mages, other learned types, like, Sunburst is a good example, who might have noticed this early on. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know anything about that, but at the same time, the fact that Cadence is there, I know this is a bit of speculation, but it makes sense to me that Sunburst would notice it, bring it to Cadence's attention, and Cadence would then come to Celestia and Luna, and that's why she's there for that particular scene. Either way, baseline magic failing, that sucks. Magical abilities, artifacts. I thought about why artifacts were the last thing. I think it's actually mostly a conceit, because otherwise the episode probably wouldn't work at all. But artifacts being the last thing to go actually makes a weird amount of sense, because artifacts, by definition, in most settings, and I believe this is true in this one as well, are objects that have been infused with magic. In other words, the magic is in the object locked away like a battery. Yeah, exactly. Active magic goes away first. You don't drain... You drain the current before you drain the battery, right? If that makes any sense. So it makes sense to me that artifacts in general, detached artifacts, I should be clear about that, would be the ones that would be the last to go because they're not in an active current. It also helps the story move forwards. So, I'm moving forward. So then Cozy automatically assumes Starlight is going, even to the point where she already packed a bag for her. That caught my attention immediately. She adapts to this change in plan immediately. This is the scene where the sociopathic thing really comes in. Now, I actually already talked about this, so I'm just going to briefly rebrush this. But this is the scene which is the best example of everything I was talking about Cozy Glow's character. Hey, I'm here, I'm in charge, everything's cool. And then Smolder is like, hold up, wait a sec. And she doesn't answer her. Cozy doesn't answer at all. Instead, she deflects. Now, she does it in a lighthearted, silly tone and does it while laughing. But let me try to bring, again, the tone out of it and just look at the words on the page. We're not all like you dragons. We are not schemers. I think someone needs a few more lessons in friendship. Then, with this deflection having been put forth, Smolder's friends, naturally, stand up for her, which leads to all of them declaring they will all share the punishment. Oh, and by the way, this is a punishment. You caught that, right? She is being punished for questioning her. You caught that, right? And all of them say we'll share the punishment too because we're friends. And Cozy Glow immediately takes this and runs in a totally different direction here and says, oh, yeah, this is great. Everyone, we're going to go do this together. And with your help, we'll make it through this time. Appealing to their sense of camaraderie. Appealing to the group mentality, the herd mentality. Oh my God. I had to pause the episode for a second. It's part of why I was so late in getting started and just really rewind and reprocess that scene because damn. Yeah, dark. That's dark right there. That's dark storytelling. Like I was talking earlier about Dragon Quest. That's straight up Dragon Quest right there. So, moving down a little bit here. So this is when we see them starting to deal with the magical lack. I love the bit about, you know, Twilight saying, why don't you just use your tail? Because that's what actual horses do, is they use their tail to get rid of bugs. And, of course, her tail is decorative purposes only. Here's the magic food thing. We already talked about that, but that's awesome. That's just amazing. And this then leads to probably the most overt thing they do to implicate Cozy right before immediately subverting it. So what they do is someone says, I'm so glad she's head mayor. And, you know, Sandbar's like, you mean temporary head mayor, right? Well, I mean, yeah, but everything's going great, right? Because she's so awesome. Huh. The episode starts to lose me a little bit here. Because this is when they start to get a little Nickelodeon. Yes, absolutely, Trihexia. He's very brute force. Although he does know a lot about magic and its movement. No, Ross! My life is over. It's okay, I'll just be Discord instead. I think that works out for me. Anyways, so... what does Nickelodeon mean as a derogatory? The kids are the only ones with brains and the adults are worthless. This is actually very pervasive in a lot of cartoons in that particular era, which I refer to as the Nickelodeon era. But probably my favorite example of this is a show I actually like, because it's an enjoyable show. Inspector Gadget. Now, Inspector Gadget's legit, but Inspector Gadget himself is a bumbling moron, who has no idea what he's doing, and has a general lack of competency. He blows his way through everything. The one who actually has a brain on that show is Penny and Brain, actually. So, yeah. Nickelodeon. Now, it doesn't go full tilt, because the Nickelodeon thing can actually really irritate me, to be completely honest. It's irritated me since I was a child, by the way, so it's not a new thing. But, nevertheless, they start to lean in that direction by having the only people even considering or questioning any of this be the kids. Also, credit to Sandbar. I'll get to that in just a second. But, exactly, Darth Medoro. So, Cozy Glow happened to pack the key of unfettered entrance in Twilight's bag, and it only has one use. Now, they just shrug that off because they're stupid. This is probably the single biggest problem with the episode right here. I know this is a weird thing to point out, but this is the biggest plot hole, in my opinion. Because nobody thinks to prop the door open. Nobody thinks to try and question this. Nobody thinks if there's some other way they can deal with this. Everyone's just cool with the fact that they only have one way in that is already consumed for a door that's going to lock behind them. It doesn't even occur to them until Tyrek points it out to them later on. Now, it's possible it can't be kept open, but this should have been a I'm sorry, maybe I've just played D&D too much, but if it was like, all right, let's open the horrible door, and I use the key and it destroys, I'm like, oh, okay, we're not going in there. We're going to figure this out first. Now, if it's a no-win scenario, if there's no way but to go in, okay, fine. But there should have been, in my opinion, at least a scene of them discussing it. It doesn't have to be long, maybe 30 seconds. Just them being like, whoa, hold on a second here. Maybe we should think about, well, I don't know, is there a way to help it? No, the door can't be held open. It's going to be closing soon. All right, maybe we do this. What if it's not Tyrek? If it's not Tyrek, we'll have to... do I have any other ideas? Long pause, shot of the door closing a little bit. Okay, let's commit to this, and we'll figure out how to get back out once we get in there. And there you go, 30 seconds of dialogue. Fixed. It's probably my biggest complaint about the whole episode, because I mentioned the Nickelodeon thing. That scene makes the main six look really dumb. I know they're probably, tunnel visioning a little bit, but you can't tell me that none of them would have thought of that. Anyways. So, whatever. They go in, and this is when the episode weirds me out a little bit, because the first thing we see is the cockatrice, and it's like, oh, okay. Huh. And we see a lot of other creatures. I didn't write all of them. There's the digging thing that bothered the changelings. There's the bugbear was there, right? Bunch of creatures. Is this just Equestria's jail? Do they just throw anything that's causing any problems into this place? Because that's kind of terrifying, actually. Now, there is an implication that people come by to take care of them regularly. After all, Tyrek has a pen pal. But nevertheless, this is the way that they portray this. This is not a pleasant portrayal, and it really, really bothers me that they just throw them in there and effectively throw away the key. That's messed up. So, anyways, I'm just gonna move past that for a second. Yeah, like this, so, I'm sorry, let me clarify my terminology here. For those of you not aware, jail and prison are actually different things. They're different, not just, literally, but in terms of how they're funded, in terms of how they operate. A jail is, at least here in the States, almost universally worse, but also lower tier and shorter stay than a prison. Prison's where you go after you've been sentenced. Right? Prison's where you go, and you stay there for a few years, and you deal with that cycle, whatever. And how good or bad that prison is very variable. Jails tend to suck. Jails are funded by the county, and they make a lot of their budget based on... I'm going to summarize this rather than going off on a rant, because I've already gone on one rant today. I've filled my quota today. Jails get their funding by being horrible to the inmates. That's the simplest way I can put that. So jails tend to really, really suck. They also are places where you put them in for any reason. So if they pick up a drunk on the streets, they'll put him in. There's a reason the drunk take exists, right? They'll put him in jail. Then they'll pull him out next night. Or if you recuse yourself, not recuse. If you turn yourself in, like if there's a trial or whatever going on, you turn yourself in. You go into jail. You haven't actually gone to trial yet. You haven't even actually been in front of a judge yet. It's just jail's the temporary holding thing. But they also tend to do some really unpleasant things with jails because they tend to try and cycle county stuff into jails because they get more money based on how many inmates are in there at a given time, even if those inmates aren't actually in the jail. That's where farming comes in. Yes, jail farming's a real thing. Now, I could keep going. The United States justice system is extremely broken and messed up and entirely funded and run and gravitating on trying to make more money. But let's ignore that for a moment. The reason I make that whole statement is jail is supposed to be the low-tier place, but it's actually worse. Prison is where you put the people who, as, okay, you are guilty of murder, go here for the next 40 years, right? Or 15 years, I think that's the minimum. Yeah, exactly, act. This place looks a lot like Equestria's jail. Because you just toss everyone into the jail, for any reason. Passing through, temporary, need to protect someone. That's usually where jails, people who need some kind of witness protection thing or police protection in the middle of a trial, they usually go into the jail too, depending on the county. Like, just about everyone, for any reason, goes into the jail. Now, Tyrek being in Tartarus, historically the place even further down and even more locked away than hell, makes sense. Tyrek being in there is logical. Why is everyone else in here? And you see my problem with this, and you see why this bothers me so much. Now, I agree with Raskor. I think what's happening here is a lack of consideration. I don't think this is malice, and I don't think this is motivated by greed, like we have in real life. I think what's happening here is that they don't have a prison. They probably don't even have a prison system. They have Tartarus. And so they throw people into Tartarus. because that's what they have. Thoughts. Moving on. So, okay. So, they get in. Woo. This is when Naysay actually shows up for the first part. I noticed that, Trathan, which is actually worrisome for a completely different reason, but I don't even want to get into that. Like, yeah, Azkaban is actually a wonderful parallel, because Azkaban, for anybody, like anybody who even is aware of Harry Potter knows Azkaban is bad. For anybody who knows, who've actually studied Harry Potter, Azkaban is much, 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 much worse than this. Azkaban is one of those things that is probably, and I mean this sincerely, one of the darkest aspects of the Harry Potter setting. The fact that they have that. And they will throw people in there for relatively minor crimes. That's a thing in that setting. That place is depression-inducing, literally, because the people who take care of it are quite literally soul suckers. And it's just kind of a deal they make with them. Like, it's just kind of a, out of sight, out of mind. It's also used as a threat. This is a line of thought which I will stress I don't agree with. That is a theory. That's not a fact. But I very much disagree with the idea that we will make the punishment for anything you do wrong so severe that you'll never do it. Mostly because I study history. And I hate to bring the DCAU into this for the 5,000th time, but anybody who's seen, the Justice Lord story arc, what's the penalty for doing anything whatsoever wrong in the Justice Lord's universe? Yeah. Anyways, moving on. Sorry, I'm drifting way off topic here, but you get my point. This is interesting to think about. And then Naysay shows up. Hi, Naysay. Love the actor as usual. He is an amazing actor. But, it's Naysay. First thing he does is he refuses to call it a school, and second thing he does is he uses I stress, apocalyptic crisis as a way to grab for power. Cute. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, one more thing. I don't want to say one more thing. You know what one of the downsides is if the penalty for anything wrong is the same? Let's say that you've stolen a carrot, and someone catches you. Well, you're screwed, because the penalty for anything is the same, so you tend to escalate. I'm not going to go full off on that topic, because that is another topic. I just wanted to mention it, because this is one of the downsides of, throwing people to Azkaban for whatever reason. Lord Tartarus. Anyways, so Naysay does say he was here to warn Twilight. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that he was here to warn Twilight about the plot of the non-ponies. Zero doubt, by the way. Look, I'm just saying, Loner. Revolution. So, he's like, hey, oh my gosh. And this then leads to Tirek, who has his place of honor, of course. And some wonderful slanting and blah, 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 blah. And all this, I've already talked about this stuff. They do the transition stuff. They really start to portray the idea that Naysay is the villain here. And I love this. I am here to defend you foals from these monsters. She's skipping off on friendship trips while dangerous creatures run loose. I'm sorry, I hate to keep reiterating this point. It's just... It's actually hard to write a bigot this well. No, it actually is. Because there needs to be a level of believability to it. Yeah, exactly, Raskor. He needs to actually mean it. He can't just be... It's too easy to make a character like Naysay, ironically, a cartoon villain. Instead, what I see in Naysay is... Well, let's just say I've seen people like Naysay in real life. Some of them are biologically related to me. And yeah, Maurice LaMarche helps a lot, because he's a great voice actor. It's the Kai Wynn thing. Kai Wynn was always well written. That was the problem. Anyways, so then Sandbar has a brain. Hey, I'm actually really happy to see Sandbar have a brain like that. I'm wondering if the other kids picked up on this immediately, Because the moment I saw Sandbar, like, oh, Chancellor, you're right. I was like, okay, yeah, I see what he's doing. I love how Naysay falls for it completely, but in fairness, Sandbar does a really convincing job of it, and doesn't even wink. At no point does he wink. He just goes along with it. And I like to think that the other kids picked up on it immediately and were playing along to help sell it. And yeah, I agree. This would be a negative to story if they didn't pick it up. Because yeah, Sandbar's seen the light. So they help sell it. He helps sell it. Naysay buys it. Where does Sandbar go? Naturally, he goes to get the Cutie Mark Crusaders. They're probably the biggest names, not the main six. The main six are kind of busy. B, the main six are personally friends with Cozy Glow. Our first Cozy Glow episode, remember? So we need to unify. We need to get the kids, Cozy Glow, and the Cutie Mark Crusaders, and we need to deal with Naysay, because Naysay is the problem. Notice how the episode has completely shifted its slant now. The entire focus is all about getting rid of the villain, who is Chancellor Naysay. Like, that's the goal. I love the pacing of this episode, by the way. It's very, very well paced. Then Tirok is like, let me out and I'll talk. And they're like, you're stupid, because that's a stupid request. So, okay, fine. But since you're stuck in here, I'll go ahead and talk about my pen pal, my protege, who I've been teaching about how magic works. And her name is... jump cut. Cozy Glow! That's the official reveal moment. And, interesting the way they do that, because that's the second to last scene in the entire episode. Immediately after that, we have Cozy Glow being a sociopath. We've already talked about this. Lack of empathy. Friendship is powerful. And friendship is power. Now, I actually can't comment anymore, because I need to see where they go with this. But this is a hell of a setup. This is a brilliant setup. It does have some flaws. It has the Nickelodeon problem. There's a few things where some of the characters don't really work as well as they should. And, you know, but otherwise, this is an exceptionally well-constructed episode, and I'm actually really impressed with it. You'll also notice that Cozy Glow is also using artifacts to keep Starlight trapped, because artifacts will last the longest, which she would know, of course. Yeah, exactly. This is the best of both worlds setup. We could comment on it, but really we need to see where it goes to finish commenting on it. So I'm actually not going to rate it yet. I'm not going to rate it right now. I want to see what they do in part 2 before I rate this episode, because that is relevant. It does change things. That being said, I do think Cozy thought her plan out, at least partially, if she's doing what I think she is. But remember, we don't actually know her plan as of this point in time. I certainly don't, because I haven't seen part 2. Remember, this is all new for me. So I'm going to go ahead and start up part 2. And I'll see you in a minute. By which I mean about 25 minutes.